Are the Liberals ready?
Getting ready, I think, yeah.
Our fight is with Pierre Poilievre. We're going to win.
Generally speaking, the framework of the strategy looks extremely good, and the Conservatives should be nervous.
Move on. We're moving on. So after a few tough weeks, some Liberal MPs emerged from caucus Wednesday saying they felt relieved and reassured, all due to a briefing from the new Liberal campaign director and some new ads debuting on social media this week. Take a look.
Now they're rolling out dental care, and they're getting pharmacare done to deliver free contraceptives and diabetes medications. Pierre Poilievre has made it clear that he would make cuts to all these investments, removing healthcare services from millions of Canadians. Canadians need progress, not cuts. We won't go back.
So that may have calmed the nerves of some jittery MPs, but will it quicken the pulse of the Canadian voters the Liberals badly need for their rebound? We're going to bring in our party insiders on this. Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. And here with me in the studio, sitting next to each other today, Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial staffer, and Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. It's the Saint FX wing of the studio right there. Mel, let's start with you on the ads. As the former communications director, what do you make of the communications argument the Liberals are putting out there in the various social media videos we're seeing these last few days?
Right. Well, I guess my initial reaction is woof. I really don't know why they've spent like the last 2 years saying that this is something that they're working on, that they're, getting ready to define Pierre Poilievre and how they're going to attack him and really define the choices. If you look at the ad, basically the message of the Liberals is, here's all the good things that we've done, and the only thing they mention are the things that the NDP's actually gotten. Without the NDP, they don't happen. So if I'm watching that ad, I'm kind of scratching my head that this is what took 2 years to put together. And then also the attack, I'm going to maybe put that in quotes, against Pierre Poilievre. Again, something that the NDP has been saying for months, if not years now. So to wait this long to say that, to me, is I can't possibly comprehend what has kept them from releasing these ads for so long. Also, the leader is barely featured. It's, a voiceover that's not the leader. There's no direct pitch to voters in the ad, like we've seen Jagmeet Singh and Pierre Poilievre do in their recent ads. So I just, if this is what they were waiting for, and you mentioned calming caucus, I don't know how this calms caucus, and I definitely don't know how, regular folks at home watch this and go, oh, finally, the Prime Minister has a plan. I didn't hear that in any of that, and if anything, if I was somebody who's waiting for them to say something, I would just be more upset. To me, this kind of looks like they've got no plan, they're not serious, and they're not going to be able to take on Pierre Poilievre in the next election.
Okay, Fred, we're going to put Mel down as undecided. Because,
Sure.
So she does not necessarily agree with Ken Hardy there, who said Conservatives should be worried or Conservatives should be afraid. Fred, how do you think, does this change anything?
If I was a Liberal MP who's been nervous for the last number of months, after getting whatever this briefing was Wednesday, and now seeing these ads, I would be catastrophically worried now.
Totally.
Because this is not a plan. This is the same message they've been saying for years. The last number of years, as Melanie pointed out, the stuff that they've been putting out, all of their communications has basically been this. They just kind of package it into this loose ad saying, hey, we've done this, this, and this. You should like us. They're not winning on these issues. They're not, they've been governing for the last number of years. These are these priority things that they've been pushing, and they're going down and down in the polls. So the message isn't working here. So to say that this is it, and I've worked on a lot of campaigns, good ones and bad ones, and the longer you're in government, you have this belief that there's someone who is handling a situation or who's going to come up with a really good idea, and you're not watching it, and you just assume it's going to come, and it doesn't always come. And that's what it feels like here. I think these guys were given false hope,
right?
And I think this is going to upset a lot.
But Fred, let me ask you this. This is what I wonder about. We all know, and people who watch this show all know, the Liberals have been saying this for years. But Canadians out there who aren't seeing any ads and aren't necessarily listening to us on a Friday night may not know. So is there value in at least trying to reach the low propensity voter, to use the phrase from the U.S. election?
But they've been in government for 9 years, and if these are the files that they've been pushing for the last 2, why don't Canadians know that? They should know what their message is. It's because they don't have an overarching narrative on what this government's trying to do. So that's where, and it is, past governments have used government advertising to push a lot of that stuff. That could have been a government ad, except for the attacks. That's too partisan.
Yeah.
Not much of an attack, but the
The self-imposed ban on government advertising took that away from them, right? They said after 2015 they wouldn't do it.
Canadians should know that this is what they've done.
So, Greg, how are you feeling? You reassured? Are you in the Ken Hardy camp, or are you in the Ali Assasi, Alexandra Mendez camp?
I was listening to my colleagues there, and all I could think of was, other than that, Kerry, how was the prom?
Yeah.
I don't disagree with a lot. Unfortunately, I don't disagree with a lot of what Mel and Fred have said here. The issue is the ads. Instead of us talking about the content, we're talking about the timing and that they're here. And I'm not completely convinced, to your point, that Canadians will see these. I'm told there's going to be a spend behind them. I hope that there is, but they've done this before. There have been other ads.
There's other things apparently coming post-U.S. election too.
Sure,
we'll see.
Right? On the Twitter, well, we can talk about them then too, and we'll be talking about now they have ads. This became the issue, and it shouldn't be the issue. And I talked about this last week. Personally, I was told that I could, say on panels that ads were coming, almost 2 months ago. This is not what I would expect when I hear ads are coming. Those are just, yes, you're checking some boxes there. The stuff about the pandemic, I have different views about the pandemic in that I think it's left a bigger mark on society than we're willing to talk about, and a lot of people just
collective trauma.
But people just want to kind of move on, and I think people, really need to watch that. I think those ads around getting through the pandemic should have been a collective pat on the back to Canadians. We stack ourselves up against other countries. Despite the tragedy, we still did fairly well. But why are you talking about that in 2024? I want to see these ads where if during a hockey game, whatever you're allowed to do on social media. But the other thing about government advertising, the dental ads were a long time coming to where people could actually see them on, if those people were still watching legacy TV, watching sporting events, they were a long time coming. They shouldn't have been.
Look, still the number one source for Canadians for their news is television, right? This is something people forget about in the digital revolution.
CBC.
Well, so the Liberals are still struggling with their message, Greg, but we did see a lot of other people at the municipal level the last couple of days carrying kind of a message, not in support of the Liberals, but in support of the housing accelerator. Because you got mayors and councillors right across the country pushing back against Pierre Poilievre, saying, I'm going to cut the GST, which a lot of people like on the sale of new houses, but to pay for it, I'm going to get rid of the housing accelerator. And 174 municipalities are like, whoa, this is going to cost us houses. This is projects we have in the queue, and they're pushing back saying don't do that. What does that do you think, to the political dynamic of this issue?
Just to build on your math, you say 174.
I think that's what I saw in terms of municipalities.
And 5 Conservative MPs.
Yes.
Revealed by Housing Minister Sean Fraser in question period, and then he followed up. So you have Conservative MPs who see the value of this program, writing Sean Fraser, asking how this program can help their community. So obviously, we've talked a lot about the pre-budget rollout last year, and that Canadians liked some of the policies, but maybe not the top policymaker. This is an example of a program that, starting in the fall of 2023, huge emphasis by this government on housing. They've run Sean Fraser all over this country. And obviously, it's a program that's working. It's the first time that things are getting a bit sticky for the Conservative leader on something like this, when his own caucus members seem to be, behind the scenes at least, supportive of it.
Fred, if you go into the suburbs and cities of Canada and suddenly there's news stories appearing on this housing project is delayed because of uncertainty over the housing accelerator, or this is stopped because they don't know if they're going to have the money, suddenly that becomes a problem for guys to build the homes is one of the core slogans.
It's an interesting contrast where the Liberals are actually throwing some punches for the really first time other than Trudeau's appearance at the foreign interference inquiry. So it does seem to be a well-coordinated pushback on this. But at the end of the day, I think the GST cut that Poilievre announced earlier this week really got widespread coverage, and I think that is what's going to impact. We're seeing mayors saying this, and they are spread around the country. It is.
It's all the local news hits, right?
It is. But at the same time, Poilievre's announcement impacts so many individuals, and I think that will win the day.
But the houses have got to be built, I guess, Mel. And if the housing accelerator money is the foundation on which these houses are built, it's hard to get your 5% GST cut if there isn't a house under $1 million to buy, because they get stopped if this program goes away.
Right, and you know, I agree with Fred here, where we saw the government take punches, and we've seen Minister Fraser do that effectively. I'll give him the credit at really pushing back against Pierre Poilievre. But this is the problem when you're talking housing, right? Folks don't totally understand what is needed to build more homes and to make homes more affordable. So when you start talking about an accelerator and you start talking about programs that may make it harder for us to build homes or for us to have more affordable homes, folks don't necessarily understand how that works. So that's kind of a benefit to Pierre Poilievre in this equation, where he's kind of taken on a fight already a little bit with municipalities and said that municipalities are a big reason why homes aren't built. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and whether or not this pushback from mayors, to your point, David, of the coverage everywhere. I think the more of that coverage there is, or the more of that pushback there is, the more it'll probably seep in with regular Canadians that okay, maybe his policies aren't up to the bar of what we need to really make a difference as to what it relates to housing in this country. But I think it's a little bit of or it points to the confusion or the difficulty really in communicating what a housing plan is, because of course, you'll remember back in 2017, the Liberals had this big plan, and there were no really stakeholders across the country who were willing to speak against it, because it was such a big, bold thing at the time, and folks aren't feeling that. So I don't know who wins this one, because I think it's a little bit complicated to talk about, and complicated for folks to understand how it's going to make it easier for them to get a home.
It is interesting, though, to see people who aren't Liberals, like municipal councillors and mayors, speaking in support of a Liberal policy, which is a net benefit for them, and we'll see what it does in that conversation. One last thing I want to quickly touch on. Mel, with the Bloc doing what the Bloc did on the 29th and saying it's going to vote against the government when it has a chance, it puts a lot of pressure on the NDP. Jagmeet Singh said this week he wouldn't play games in Parliament with the Conservatives in the Bloc, and he spoke to Politico and said, we really shouldn't have an election until Justice Og has finished her work, and we've got the recommendations to copper fasten the election. That's a compelling case to wait, given the fervor at which this town and all the parties demanded that Justice Og be appointed to do this job. What do you think?
Totally. And we've kind of said this a few times on this panel of, this back and forth, the politicizing of this issue just means that we're pushing down any reforms that we really desperately need to bring in to secure our elections and to secure our democracy. So totally appreciate what Jagmeet is saying there, and I also like that he's going on his terms. He's not going to just give whatever Pierre Poilievre wants to Pierre Poilievre. So I think that Jagmeet was showing, adult in the room, particularly on this issue. He's really the only leader that understands this issue on a different level. So I think we're seeing that in his communications, and taking a pragmatic approach, I think is to the benefit of all of us, really.
Greg, what do you think that does for the runway the government has, the Liberals have? I mean, does this get you to spring? Does this get you to a budget? What do you think?
If people are looking for the signs of hope, if you look in polling, one of the things is the Conservative leaders' negatives are pretty high, and according to some polling, growing. The longer that the government has to get, for example, what we just talked about, the housing efforts, the fact that municipalities are on board, there is something that's an item of content where it's something real, as opposed to a three word kind of slogan. It's actually something that's tangible. That the more time the government has to get that across, and I'm sure the NDP are going to say the more time that they have to point to their successes with those same programs, the better.
Okay, Fred, quick last word from you on this, and take a break.
Well, look, I think when it comes down to it, Poilievre's argument on this, as Melanie pointed out, it hits individuals on what he's doing with the GST cut.